While we're waiting for them, I'll just go ahead and introduce the program and get started. Like I said, my name is Marina Males, and I'm the new Executive Director for York Ready for Climate Action. And I'm here instead of Sophie, who works with the library and is out this week. So tonight's program is going to look at weatherization and heat pumps. We all made it through the cold snap a couple of weeks ago, and I'm sure each of us can say exactly where in the house the leaks are and where the insulation needs some work. But hopefully everybody's heating system was up to the task. And from what I hear, heat pumps performed admirably well despite the really wild temperatures. So this program is going to delve into some solutions for both insulation and for heating systems. We can talk about where the heating system may not have met our needs and what upgrades are possible. Not seeing Fred or Brian or Eric yet. Is that correct? So I'm still waiting for them, and I'm going to do a little bit more introduction to talk about what the library has done and what York Ready for Climate Action is up to. Over the next few weeks, as the library does these presentations, we'll be hearing more about the journey the library has been on to improve the building envelope and electrify the systems. The library in 2020 undertook an energy audit to better understand where the gaps are, where insulation is needed, and that kind of thing. There are major areas of concern. Some of the old weather stripping and window casings are old and have deteriorated over the 20 years and need to be replaced. And then there are areas where cold is just kind of pouring in and insulation is needed. So the library has convened an energy committee to look at shoring up the building envelope and also potentially to electrify the heating system along with other potential improvements. So that's something we'll continue to be talking about, and the library hopes to kind of educate the community as the library learns about this work. York Ready for Climate Action, if you haven't heard of it, is a grassroots citizens organization that's dedicated to increasing the community's awareness about climate change. York Ready for Climate Action is home to Eco Homes and RAD, which is Waste Reduction and Diversion. The group was formerly known as York Ready for 100 before updating its name and becoming a 501c3 last year. And I just started as executive director beginning of last week, so all of this is new and exciting. A large part of what YRCA is doing is providing information and personal assistance to residents who want to make these kinds of changes to their homes, but might feel overwhelmed by all of the different options, all of the different information about how the state of Maine might send you a rebate or the federal government might have a grant for you. And so we're working on training up experts we're calling energy coaches that are going to be able to help people kind of navigate this whole system. So that's coming in mid-April. That's an exciting piece. And the organization has been doing a lot of work already through Eco Homes and other outreach to educate folks on these kinds of issues. So I am not seeing the speakers, which is kind of a problem, and we were expecting them to be here. So I'm wondering if, in lieu of them being here, or if they are late while we wait for them to arrive, if we might just kind of share, if folks could turn on their video and maybe put in the chat if you have a question, or go ahead and raise your hand. Let's talk about what questions you have in regards to heat pumps, in regards to properly insulating your home. I'm curious to hear if folks have done this already, if you've done an energy audit of your home and what that was like. Is there anyone who might share with us who has some experience with either having done this kind of upgrade already, or has some questions that we can kind of see if anyone else knows? And I'm getting a hand raised from 819-706.
Yes, I'm just curious about what happened at the budget meeting on last Thursday. So I'd just like to know what the outcome of that was.
Sure, I do know that. A lot of people showed up to talk. It was really pretty remarkable, the number of folks who came out in support of the environmental planning position. And in the end, the budget committee did vote to fund that position. Yeah. So
fantastic! Great.
Yeah, it was a
what a pleasant surprise.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so is there someone here who has completed this kind of work in their home and will be willing to share, or is in the process of considering it? or anyone who has questions.
Well, I'll jump in here. This is Ron McAllister, Ron and Judith McAllister.
You're on.
We just had a, hi, how are you?
Good.
We just had about a week's worth of work done by Evergreen Home Performance. They're based in Rockland and in Portland. We had a problem with dampness in our basement and no insulation. So they installed about 7 inches of cellulose about in the ceiling or below the floor on the first floor. And they sealed all the places where the joists came to the sills. So all that was sealed up as well.
Spray foam.
And they did that with spray foam. They were here. There were 5 delightful guys who were here, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, sometimes 5. And they were here for 7 days working on it. I can't tell you how much cellulose insulation they poured in, but it was hundreds of pounds of it, I'm sure. And we can see the difference already. You know, we don't have the draftiness that we had. They did a door blower test before they started the work, and they did it after they finished the work. I'm not sure it showed a big difference, but that's because there's other work that we need to do that we just aren't going to budget for this year. But we can certainly feel the tightness of it and the dryness of it. It's now a fairly steady 50 degrees in our cellar, which is a good thing, I guess, especially in the summer, maybe. It's like a meat locker down there just now. But so if you have any bacon you want to store someplace, you can just bring it to our house and we'll be glad to put it away for you. But the guys that came, everybody we worked with, from the estimate to the crew chief to the guy who led the team that was here, they were just terrific. We really enjoyed having them in the house, and very respectful, very clean. They got cleaned up after themselves every day, really did a great job. So I certainly recommend them. And now we're just hoping that we're going to get a nice rebate from Efficiency Maine. I haven't finished that process yet. That'll be done by Evergreen Home Performance. And we'll see how much it amounts to, what percentage it is, but I'm sort of expecting somewhere around 35 or 38% to be rebated to us. So that's a big help. So that's our story anyway.
Thank you. Yeah, Anne asks in the chat who is qualified to do an energy audit. And my understanding is there are various companies that you can find and contract with. How did you end up finding your company, Ron?
Well, I started looking around on the Efficiency Maine website, and they have a list of people. Also, York Echo Homes had some information about it from another company, which we had them out as well. I also had earlier in the year, we had put in, earlier last year, we had put in a heat pump water heater, and that was installed by a company in Kennebunk. So they gave us some estimates on equipment, but not really weatherization. I had 2 different estimates on weatherization, and we decided to go with Evergreen. It's just like, we were just confident in what they told us and what they did.
Thank you. And another question from John, what year was your home built?
The home was built in 1983. It's a post and beam house, so take that to mean whatever you want.
Got it. So Ron, you mentioned the door blower test, and I haven't had this done in my home, but I imagine there's like a giant fan or something that will
Yeah, they leave a door to the outside open. They seal it up in a temporary way. They put a big, like a room fan, you know, 1.5 feet across, and it evacuates the air out of the house, and they can tell, you know, how much leakage there is going on. So it helped us identify other areas that we can work on in the future, but our focus was on the basement, and the door to the basement was closed. I didn't want them drawing 50-degree air up from the cellar. And they also did a test on our furnace when they left, because they wanted to be sure it wasn't so insulated that there wouldn't be enough air for the furnace to operate. So that was fine too, very efficient, and it worked out well.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing that experience. Are there others here who have had a similar experience, having had an energy audit done or anything like that?
Marina, if I could just make a comment, I think it's confusing about these energy audits. Ron, I'm assuming that you had a walkthrough audit that where there was no cost involved.
Yeah, we didn't pay anything extra for what they did, but I'm sure we paid for what they did, buried
Right.
in overall cost.
So it's confusing because there are two models, and I think the old model was basically a complete audit, which would cost in the order of $400 or $500, not reimbursed by Efficiency Maine. And that would be, include a combustion test of your furnace, and it would include the blower door test and infrared camera. So really a pretty complete audit that maybe would take 3 hours. But I think more recently, what's happened in the industry is the audit is more a energy or a home sort of energy assessment. And it's more a walkthrough that might take 45 minutes or an hour.
Yeah, that was more
And
like,
there's no charge.
right.
to
That was
that.
like we had done. It wasn't what I would call an energy audit. There was no infrared outside the house. They did have a laser thermometer that kind of read cold areas of the house, but yeah, it took about 45 minutes probably each time.
Right. So there are these two choices. I think the industry standard is moving towards this kind of free assessment with then a estimate about what kind of work needs to be done. But there are these two different choices, and I know some companies just do complete audits. Most do the assessments.
Great. We have a question in the chat from Nancy, who's heard from multiple sources that heat pumps are less efficient than gas heat when temps are under 40 degrees. She's heard others say that that's not true at all. Both opinions are there, and she's wondering what others think. We're not sure what to do. Is there anyone here who has experience with heat pumps who would speak to their efficiency under 40 degrees?
Yeah, I can speak to that. We built up an office building back in the mid 1980s, and we used heat pumps then. They were good down to between 25 and 30 degrees, and then we had gas backup. So that's kind of the old heat pump, but the field is revolutionized, and there are now these heat pumps that work great in cold environments and are good down to supposedly minus 15. And I think we were talking about this the other day after that really cold day we had here. I know at my house it was minus 15, and the heat pump was still, pushing out heat. So, and there have been studies that show that even in Maine winters, these new heat pumps function just fine without any backup. But there's a lot of people who still have that mentality from the 1980s, 1990s with the heat pumps that did not work well below 25, 30 degrees.
Well, maybe I can clarify a little bit. So my question is less, will they work? I think they work, but it's a question of, is it actually that efficient or useful environmentally when you get that low temperature? I'm not quite sure how to ask the question, but it's not so much, will they produce heat? I know they can produce heat, but is it actually that useful or beneficial?
Yeah, that's a tough question, because then it brings out, how much are you paying for electricity for the heat pump, and how good is the grid in terms of having renewable energy on the grid versus having a backup fossil fuel system where you're using heating fuel. My understanding is you're still better off in terms of the environment to be using your heat pump even in those low temperatures.
Thank you. Brian, I'm seeing you having joined us. Brian, are you possibly here from one of the energy companies?
You're from Evergreen.
Oh, fantastic. So we've had our signals crossed and I've been emailing back and forth with Fred here, trying to get a password for him to get into the meeting. And of course, I'm not using my own computer and Sophie has lots of instructions and it's all a bit confusing. So we're working on getting the folks who have the details in the door. Brian, we had a question about the actual energy efficiency of using a heat pump under 40 degrees and whether you're really saving anything energy wise when you're having to, the heat pumps are having to work harder.
The answer is unequivocally yes. You should use your heat pump as hard as you can, as long as you can, as often as you can, so that you're not burning other fuels. If you can't get enough heat out of it, that's when you should turn on your backup supply. So the recommendation is have your heat pump high enough so that it keeps you warm, set your backup system a few degrees cooler. So if it can't keep up, the backup system will kick on. The new systems, meaning the ones from the last 5 to 10 years, are good down to at least 5 below. And the current models are good to 15 below, meaning they'll put out their rated output at 15 below zero.
Thank you. We had a question from John Werner. Our heat pump system installed last September operated down to 14 degrees, or maybe this is just a comment, over the recent super cold weekend. We have a previously installed propane fire central HVAC system, so we turned that on over the weekend. With our heat pump, we opted for a unit which produced more BTUs, realizing that with this deep cold, these deep cold periods, we would turn on our central system. Thank you, John, for sharing that. Brian, do you have some words? You want to introduce yourself and
Sure.
maybe while you're talking, I'll see if I can help Fred get in the door here.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So thank you very much for all coming out tonight virtually. And my name is Brian Robinson. I'm the Vice President at Evergreen Home Performance. We're a vertically integrated contracting company that has been making energy efficiency improvements throughout the state since 2006. I can't tell you how many houses I've been in or we've been in and worked on, but we specialize in the difficult older homes, dating back as far as 1760s, 1770s homes, right up to stuff that's been built in the last couple of years. I've yet to find a single home that I've been invited to that can't save a lot of energy. But of course, no one invites me to see their passive house either. But that said, the news is that it's incredibly encouraging how much of a difference we can make if when we get started, once we get started. And we've found that there's a sort of a wonderful 3-step process that folks can follow, which is to eliminate waste, meaning stop heating York, stop cooling York. Can I see a show of hands of people who enjoy heating or cooling the community in which you live in York? Anybody, any hands up? I'm not seeing any hands. Of course, I don't see a lot of video either, but I've yet to meet a customer who says, I love heating my town. I feel so good. No, we can eliminate that waste. Then we can have a really efficient supply for our heating and cooling, which is the majority of our building's energy use. And those are things like what you're talking about, heat pumps. And then you can get your electrons from a clean source. So from solar, from hydro, from wind power, maybe someday from tidal power. With that 3-step program, super easy to reduce your energy use and your carbon footprint and your costs by 70% or more. So we don't have to wait for some future innovation to be able to do this. We have the technology right now to make these changes. And the best time to do it is tomorrow. It's a little late in the day to do it today, so do it tomorrow. Once you get started, you're likely to keep going with your energy reduction, your waste reduction, and all of that. And it's amazing because once you do it, your friends ask and they say, "Hey, how did it work out for you?" And you say, "Gee, it worked great." And they say, "Wow, I want me some of that." So that works. So should I go into my slide deck or should we wait for Fred? What are we doing?
I think maybe go ahead into it. I've tried a couple of different passwords for Fred to get in. So I'll make you co-host here so that you can share. And that should do it there.
All right, I'm going to attempt to share and we'll see if we can go over to my screen number 2. I think.
It worked. Amazing.
It works. Fantastic. Okay. So participants can now see my screen. Terrific. So I already made my introduction, as I say. So as we say, Evergreen, blah, blah, blah. We, the last piece I'll say about us as a company is last year we turned approximately $500,000 of efficiency mains rebate money back to customers throughout the state of Maine, something we're super proud of. So we lead the state in getting money into homeowners' pockets and out of efficiency mains pockets. So we feel good about that. So let's see here if I can move ahead on this. Where am I going here? Where I should be able to tap to the side. Where am I going? There we go. So this is what I was talking about earlier, is this concept of waste versus supply versus source. And it's, we all remember from the 1960s or 70s, if we're old enough to, that little symbol that was reduce, reuse. I can't remember what the recycle. I think that was it. Reduce, reuse, recycle, right? The first thing was reduce. Why? Because if you don't need that piece of plastic packaging, then you don't have to recycle it at the end of the day. You just don't take it in the first place. And this is the same concept. If we reduce waste, meaning we eliminate what we don't need to be throwing out the window, then we've got a lot less to worry about further down the supply chain. So this is something I've come up with that seems to resonate with folks. So step 1, eliminate unnecessary waste. Reduce your building's demand. You can save 30 to 60% of your cost, 30 to 60% of your carbon by things like air sealing and insulating, not letting what you've put into the house get out of it. Make a good, we talk about a building envelope or a building shell. Make the building really resist the outdoors so that you can create the environment that you want inside and keeping it inside. So demand is really is what you've lost and what you need to replace. So if we don't lose it, then we don't need to replace it. And it's the replacing that's expensive. Most demand is unnecessary waste. A passive house is a house that requires less than 1/10 of the energy of a current modern built to code house. And it's done simply by making it really super efficient, super well insulated, super thick windows that don't let the heat out, very tight construction so the breeze doesn't come and suck the heat out of your house and so forth. And we have the technology to do this. It's more difficult in existing housing stock, but we can't get it to 1/10 of the energy demand. We can get it down maybe to 1/3 the prior energy demand, which is pretty darn good. So again, you can stop heating and cooling York. That's the big message. Step 2, efficient supply. Electrify, electrify, electrify. Switch from burning fuel in your house, whether it's natural gas, propane, oil, to electrification. Heat pumps, heat pumps, heat pumps. They could be ground source where you're connected to a well and you're exchanging, you're pulling heat out of the earth to put into your house, or you could be air source heat pump, which is what we're most familiar with. Those units on the outside of your house that extract heat from the air. Either they take it from the outside and put it in, or the inside and put it out. It's a really well-known process and principle. We've been using it in our houses since the 1940s or so. Once we switched from ice boxes to refrigeration. Refrigerators are heat pumps. Air conditioners are heat pumps. They move heat from one place to another. So it's not something brand new that's, wow, this is the latest thing. No, we've been doing this for longer than I've been alive. And that's saying something. So supply is how you add what you've lost, i.e. the heating and cooling. And that goes for water as well as the air itself. And step 3, hopefully you guys aren't seeing this menu bar across the top. Oops, there we go. Oops, there we are. Clean energy source. And that's get your electrons from a clean source. Solar, wind, hydro, whatever. And this is how we can really, this is a triple threat. This is this is the grand slam to do all 3 of these things. And order matters to some degree, because if you don't eliminate the waste, you might put in 6 heat pumps when you only need 3 heat pumps. You might put up, 600 solar panels and you only need 300 solar panels. So it makes sense to start with eliminating waste so that you get the right size fixtures in the future for heating, cooling, and for your electrification if you go that direction. What we don't want to do is to wholesale switch to heat pumps and then have to put up twice as many power transmission lines to be able to handle the increased demand, and need to build that many more production facilities for electricity, whether even if it's solar. Why pave a field with solar panels if we don't need to? So that's my big shtick right there, those 3 things. So reducing your costs and your carbon output, you can reduce your home energy use by 70% or more. And it's really pretty easy to do. We've been doing each of these steps for many, many years. And starting right away makes a difference, because if you're using 3 times as much energy as you need to, if you wait a year, it's going to take 2 to 3 or more years additionally for you to capture that, to save that energy in the future. So starting now, even if it's a small step, makes a big difference. So there's no good reason not to start right away. What does that look like? Again, roughly 55% of your energy use is space heating and cooling. So that's the big place to start. Roughly 15% is hot water, showers, dishes, what we sometimes call domestic hot water. We have heat pumps for that as well. They're called heat pump water heaters. They're fantastic. I've had one for about 10 years. They work great. It works in concert with my solar. It's fantastic. And the balance is electrical things, appliances, lighting, dishwashers, laundry machines. And to get efficiencies there, use cold water. Get an Energy Star unit. When you replace a unit, get the most energy efficient unit you can purchase right now, because it will pay for itself over time. If you haven't switched out all your bulbs to LEDs, do that. Start with the bulbs you use most. These are simple things that we can do. We know how to do. We've been doing it for decades. The house itself, that big opportunity, that 55% of your home energy use, A lot of it is related to air leakage. This is exchanging outside air with inside air and vice versa. We need some exchange to keep the air fresh, to keep down cooking and bathroom odors, so we can breathe. But it's rare that we're going to get a house too tight at this stage of the game. And that's where hiring a professional makes a lot of sense, because they can target the areas where there's the most air leakage, so you can most effectively stop the air exchange, the unnecessary air leakage, quickly and efficiently without compromising the fresh air that you need to breathe. It's a wonderful thing when a house gets to be so tight that it needs a fresh air ventilation system. It's one of the best things you can do for your health, is to have that fresh air system. So there's a lot of opportunities through ceilings, through walls of basements, through walls of the house. This is also walls over here. Windows and doors don't make up a huge amount. We think they do because we feel the cold air coming in around them. But they together only make up 20% of the total air leakage in the house. They're often not the sole solution. They can be a part of it. Quick little mini science lesson: air leaks in the top of the house and the bottom of the house matter most. And that has to do with air pressure, because as we warm the air up in our house, just like a balloon, that warm air rises and puts pressure against the top boundary of the house, typically the attic to the living space ceiling, and it pushes hard and it finds its way out. And it's insidious. We don't notice it because we can't feel the air going away from us like we can feel the air that leaks in around a window or through a dryer vent or through a rubble stone foundation that we might have in the basement. We feel that air because it's blowing into the house. It's cold and coming in. We can't feel the warm air that we're losing in the top half of the house. So leaks up high and leaks down low make more of a difference than leaks in the middle. And that's, again, where your energy auditor can help you determine what to do when and where, so that you get the biggest bang for your buck. Insulating, that's the other way. So we lose heat through the air moving. We lose heat through heat moving through an object, conduction. And so 1/3 of the heat can be lost through the walls, 26% through the roof or the ceiling, 18% through the windows and doors, so 20% through the windows and doors, and 10% through ventilation and drafts. So again, let's see, I'm going to admit somebody into the waiting room. So again, there's a tremendous opportunity. Most houses that we see, a couple thousand a year, are insulated at the standard from the 1970s or the 1980s. You know, we're in a whole new century now. We could do a whole lot better. We've got products that are resilient from rodents and insects and mold and mildew. So it's not your old pink fiberglass. It's not the Pink Panther saying, hey, you know, hey, whatever the Pink Panther says. That was as good as we knew back then, but we're a lot better now. Just like a car from the 1970s, it might be cool to look at, but the efficiency and the safety is, you know, in the latrine. It's not very good. And so we've made the same kind of strides with the way that we insulate and the products that we insulate with. So they're modern, they're low carbon, low embodied energy, so they don't take a lot of energy to produce. Many of them are recycled, you know, have proven history of great results over many decades. Some people like to DIY products. That's great. if you want to wrap your pipes with some old sweat socks, it's better than nothing at all. If you happen to venture into your attic and you lift up that bat of fiberglass and you see it's dusty and dirty, that's a sign of air leakage. Almost every house that has this, you could find this air leakage if you have a can light. That's that recessed light in the ceiling. And it's just one of many, many examples. Moving on to what you can actually do. This is a house with a poured foundation, a relatively modern house, something from at least the 1950s or later. And it's been insulated. The walls have been insulated, much like what is required by current building codes, with rigid foam insulation. And it stops 90+% of the heat that is being lost through that basement. So you can go from 0 to 90 pretty darn easily. If you have a heating system that isn't sealed and insulated, it means that you're unnecessarily pumping energy into your basement. So sealing and insulating ductwork or pipes makes a tremendous difference. You can deliver 25% more heated air right away, while you're still using that current, although somewhat antiquated heating system. Attics are ripe for much more insulation because there's a lot of space up there to put it in. If you need storage, some storage space can be preserved. And that gray material you see in the background here, that's cellulose. That's basically a newspaper that someone put into a blender and added 20 mule team borax to keep the insects and the fire and the rodents away. It's a product that may have even originated its life in Maine from a tree. It's all natural. It's low embodied energy. It doesn't have to be highly processed to be made. It doesn't require fire like fiberglass or rock wool, and it doesn't require oil like spray foam. So it's a wonderful product in a lot of applications. It's not perfect everywhere, but in the attics, it's basically number one. It's like powder snow. It's like down jacket. It's great. One of the tools that we use to determine heat loss is a infrared camera, a thermal imager. And here in this image, you can see darker objects are colder, in this case, as cold as 7 degrees, and lighter objects are warmer, as much as 27 degrees. So here we're looking at the outside of a house, and the foundation of the house, which is this yellow section, it's glowing. It's giving off heat. It's giving off heat that homeowner paid to create in their house, and it's giving it to the outdoors. And we see this on virtually every single home that we go to. So if you look in your basement and you don't see insulation on the foundation wall, and you don't see it on the outside, that's a place that is ripe for change right there. And virtually every house has that opportunity. You can't build this way anymore. You have to insulate your foundation if you build today. Building codes aren't great, but they're fantastic in comparison to what we did even as little as 15 or 20 years ago. I don't want to hijack this whole conversation. There's a lot of detail that we can go into, but some of the most common suspects for basement leakage would be coming through the foundation. If you have a rubble stone wall, if your house is more than 75 years old, around windows or doors or bulkheads. If you've got that staircase that walks down into your basement and you just have an old piece of plywood leaning up against the opening, probably a lot of cold air rushing in there. Those are some great places to get started to block air leakage. So also some safety places around the chimney, because if a fire were to start in your basement, you don't want it coming up around the chimney in the chase. That's the space or gap between the chimney and the floor and walls. So it's real easy to tell where your air leakage is in your basement because you can feel it. And it's real easy to tell if you've got insulation because you can see it or not. It's hard to know. Well, sorry, this is more about the floors and walls. So the point is to keep the ground heat in, eliminate freezing pipes, and stop you from heating the outdoors. If you look up and you don't see any insulation on the ceiling of your basement, that's another area that's ripe for some insulation because most of us don't spend a lot of time in our basements. So we want to keep our house warm. It's okay if the basement gets cool as long as it doesn't freeze. So heat where we need to, don't heat where we don't need to. Distribution, we saw that earlier, ducts. If you don't have something like a warm jacket over your ducts or your pipes, that's a place that could use it. These are kind of homeowner friendly things to do. I'm happy to provide anyone with some information about that if they'd like. Again, pipe insulation, if you reach out and touch a pipe and it feels hot in your basement, that is an indication that you're losing heat unnecessarily. You can stop that. Attics, there's air sealing opportunities around the hatch, pull down attic stairs or the walk up stairs. If you have any lighting that penetrates, anything that penetrates through your ceiling. If you look at the room behind me here, no can lights, no, nothing going through my ceiling. I don't want to heat Camden where I live. Other places around chimney chases, vent pipes. Yesterday I was in Falmouth at a client's house and she had an elevator. She uses it every year to move her luggage when she travels because it's heavy and she doesn't like to carry it down the stairs. I looked in, I picked the lock so I could open up and look in the shaft. I looked up, I could see the roof. I could see the roof of her house. There was a 4-foot by 6-foot shaft that was unblocked and unsealed. No insulation, no air sealing. It's like a window to the outdoors, the size of a picture window. She wondered why she was spending $500 a month on heating oil. Crazy. But if you don't look, you'll never notice it. And if you don't want to go there, call someone like us. We'll go there. We love that stuff. Is there any insulation up there? Current code is R50. That's 14 to 20 inches of fluffy stuff. If you put your arm in there and it doesn't come up to your elbow, you don't have enough fluffy stuff. Get some more fluffy stuff. It's good. It keeps you warm. Walls. This is really hard for you to assess yourself. And it's the hardest thing to change because it involves having to get into the wall to make those changes. But up until the 1960s, even into the 60s, many walls aren't fully filled with insulation. But this isn't something that you can do yourself or figure out unless you tear the surface off the wall, in which case, fill it with fluffy stuff. Again, just some examples. This is rubble stone that has some mortar around it, but it's basically a stone foundation. No insulation, no R value. This is straight out of the 1800s playbook. Like, hey, my house is as good as the 1800s. I'm doing great. No, not so much. This is another stone foundation. There's no insulation in the ceiling. So there's an opportunity both to insulate the walls to keep things from freezing and the ceiling to keep the heat in the living space. This is not a basement that you want to go and hang out in. This is not going to become a she shed or a man cave. Okay. We saw some foam insulation. This is spray foam. It's made from oil. It's not my best friend, but it's great on stone foundations because it fills in the gaps and the cracks, creates a nice kind of icebox look to your basement, and it lasts forever. If you have a window, we might fill it with some rigid foam and then make a cut so that you can pull that plug out so you can still have the window, but you can also have the insulation. This is an example of this type of insulation we would put into the ceiling. We put a fabric across and then we pump it full of fluffy stuff. but we need the fabric to hold it up in place. And if you've got a really old house, you may have a little grotto for your paints and stains and things like that. I've also seen wine stored there occasionally. Insulating pipes. So if you don't have black squishy stuff on your pipes that are hot to the touch, put some black squishy stuff on it. Makes a big difference. It delivers that heat then from your heating system into your living space, which is where you really need it. We already talked about the duct work. The gap around your chimney, which is there for safety, should not be spanned by insulation. That needs some sheet metal and some really interesting pink, or sometimes it's yellow caulk called fire caulk. It doesn't burn. Don't ever put anything burnable up next to the chimney. This is a house, it was quite a bit of snow that year, as you can see. This was before we had done any work to it. They were losing a lot of heat up into their attic, and it was causing a lot of snow melt and icicles. This is the same house post-improvement. Same amount of snow on the roof, not an icicle in sight. So they stopped heating their town, and they were pretty happy about it. We talked earlier about that, insulation. It's important not to block things like the vent to the outdoors. And again, you can have some storage space as well as a lot of insulation as well. A lot of your houses are probably filled with fiberglass insulation. This is a wall that is literally puking fiberglass. We cut a hole in it to pull out the fiberglass so that we could replace it with a better cellulose insulation. And we got lucky. We were able to pull a whole lot out of a single 4-inch diameter hole. So we can do some amazing things. This isn't our first rodeo.
Brian, can we take maybe 1 or 2 more minutes and then leave some time for questions?
So and so again, we use a thermal camera. If you've got things like tongue and grooves, not a continuous drywall, it's going to be kind of leaky. Sort of this sort of massive air leakage that you see. And once we finish the project, this is once we blocked, that's the same ceiling. This is the before image and this is after, once we air sealed it. So, and insulated it. So it's a huge difference. All of this yellow are air leaks. And Efficiency Maine has got some fantastic rebates out there, depending on your income level. You can get as much as $8,600 back from them, plus $1,200 tax credit from the feds. So you can get almost $10,000 back, depending on whether you're income eligible. And it runs between 40 and 80% of your project cost. And I think that's it. So let's go to questions.
Thank you so much, Brian. We're also joined by Eric from Pettigrew HVAC, who I imagine can take questions about heat pumps as well. So if you have questions for Brian or Eric, now would be the time. You can raise your hand or put your question in the chat.
Hi, I don't think you can see me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
John? Oh, good. Thank you.
There we go.
Great. So my question is, with the we're looking to do some heat pumps in an old 1970s house that has a inefficient furnace. But now with the cost of electricity going up, does that change the whole value ratio?
It has to. Where it ends up, we don't really know, because it's going to come down to also what the fuel cost is going to be. I think the main thing that you guys can probably take out of what we've seen so far, Brian did an excellent job, which is it's all about insulation. The better insulated your house to begin with, the better job you can do with a heat pump and the more efficiently. Houses that are insulated very poorly, There's lots of guys out there that are trying to make a quick buck, putting heat pumps in them without any regard to the actual building construction, potential upgrades. A lot of folks who are energy conscious, trying to save some money as well, will get a heat pump and then later on decide to insulate. And now the heat pump system's not sized right. It's oversized, inefficient because it was never designed for that situation. So the usual first place to begin with is to reduce the amount of heat leaking out of your house to begin with.
Okay.
That's going to give you the most bang for the buck, no matter what the fuel costs are. And
Right.
then from there, the proper installation, because even an old dinosaur of a furnace is going to cost you less to heat your house with when your house is properly insulated. So that's kind of a key component that gets overlooked because of guys who are in my trade, which is HVAC, wanting just to design and sell a system and move on to the next one.
Mhm.
So it's usually anything that you can do to insulate your house is money in the bank to begin with. Having said that, heat pumps definitely have their place. They also have their limitations. So it's important to really have someone who understands them well and can discuss your lifestyle and your house and what best fits, because what may work really well in one installation may not work well in another.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yep.
That definitely answers my question.
Thanks. We've got a
Well,
question.
we have,
Oh, go ahead.
this is Carol and Dan. We have a heat pump system that we've had for 2 years, and I've been keeping records. And this is the issue about electricity rates going up. At the current rate for fuel oil and electricity, our heat pump system is about 15%, 15 to 18% cheaper than it would be with the amount of oil we were using before we got it.
Correct.
So that's an advantage, even if you aren't insulated.
Right. Well, and there's also differences between, say, a central heat pump system versus doing mini splits. And the reason is in the technology of the equipment itself. Mini splits usually don't have any kind of backup heat. There are some air handler versions that do, but most of them have no supplemental. It's just the heat pump, and they're able to heat down to a very cold temperature. With a central heat pump system, they've improved a lot, but because of the limitations of ductwork and the effect that has on the system, they usually start to fall off the map somewhere in the 20s, occasionally even the low 30s outside. During the milder temperatures, they're still saving a lot of money, but the type of heat pump is going to have an effect in terms of what you're able to save and when you're able to use it.
We have a ducted heat pump system, and it's worked very well, except for 1 week when we had the minus whatever temperature, we needed
Correct.
to use some backup. But in general, it doesn't have a backup. It doesn't pull on anything else. It's just the heat pump. It just gets blown through an air handling system.
Right.
And it's worked very well. And that is the system that we are getting that kind of advantage on it.
Right, which is
Don't
absolutely
forget
awesome.
air conditioning in the summer when you need it too.
Well, right.
Yeah,
Well,
which
not
we
to
didn't
mention,
have
one of the things that most people don't realize is the efficiency of the really high efficient heat pumps give you that great efficiency on the air conditioning side too. So you have to kind of look at the annual savings you're going to get. I've got some customers that are like, yeah, I only use my heat pump, for the most part, December and then March on. I don't use it in January, February. I tried explaining to them to try giving it a try, but they don't like the way it operates. I understand where they're coming from. The component that they end up missing, though, is that they run this thing all summer long for air conditioning, and the new heat pump systems, efficiency-wise, are much better than a lot of the air conditioning systems out there, and a lot of times they're less expensive. Rough example, not to sell any kind of brands. There's some heat pumps out there. Bosch probably makes the most popular one, but there's a couple other brands that use the same technology. Some of these are getting anywhere from 15 to 20 SEER. The equivalent 20 SEER air conditioner only is twice the cost. So it's kind of a no-brainer. So there's, when we're looking at energy savings, being in New England, we tend to look at the heating side. But the cooling side as well, especially with these, makes a huge difference.
All right, thank you for that. We have a question in the chat from John. Our potential next project is to consider the replacement of our propane-fired hot water heater with a heat pump or high-efficiency electric tank heater unit. We are a family of 2 adults. What type of savings might we realize from these 2 alternatives?
All right, so that's electric heat pump water heater and what else?
Or a high-efficiency electric tank heater.
Okay, so one of the things that's happening right now, and I understand it, but I think it's a mistake, is that heat pump water heaters are being pushed really, really heavily. They're an excellent tool, and in the right installation, they're really, really good, but they're not for every situation. I have a lot of customers who have very small mechanical rooms who want to put these in. They do make some units that can be ducted that can make a difference, because you can divert the cool air that's coming off of this into another area to help cool that area. But there are limitations with it. There's a installation that we did for a builder a few years ago in Portsmouth. They did mini split heat pumps throughout the entire home. That was the only form of heat. The only backup was they had a small European wood stove that honestly didn't do much more than the living room. They had a very, very well insulated mechanical cellar that maybe was 200 square feet, and that's, the height was lower. So it wasn't like a 20 by 20 room. It was much smaller than that, had a lot of mechanical stuff in, very well insulated. They put one of these units in and the heat pump unit never ran because the basement was too cold. It cooled it down so much, it air conditioned it. So it was constantly having to go to electric elements. I only say that as a caution because there's some areas you should never have anything like that. Other areas, they work wonderfully well. Compared to a standard electric water heater, they're going to save you money. Compared to some of the gas water heaters, some of the tank ones, they still do a much better job saving you money on. Some of them, they kind of break even. It really depends on the location. So the best thing is to have a professional come out, look at what your actual location is, and then make the recommendation. But they're not necessarily for every situation. One of the things that I found as well is the way the heat pump works on these water heaters is it heats the water very slowly, very gradually. They run a long time, but they save money doing that. If that component can't keep up, the electric elements take over. That usually happens with high demand, like taking a shower. If the water heater itself is one of the smaller versions, low mass, not a whole lot of storage, what happens is with a larger family, it kicks to those electric elements a lot. So usually I recommend people, if they're looking at something like that, to get the largest unit that they can afford, because it's actually going to run more efficiently, because with that extra storage, normal usage isn't going to cool it down enough where it's constantly going to the electric elements.
Thank you. Any other questions? We're getting close to our hour here, but time for one more question. Brian.
So are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So one thing I would perhaps direct people to, and I think Eric did a fantastic job of explaining, these pros and cons, is to, if you go to the Efficiency Maine website, and I'm trying to see if I can go here. Oh yeah, I'm going to share my screen again, just because I can kind of step you through it. Let's see here. What is it saying? Screen 2, right? Share. Okay. If you go to the Efficiency Maine website, this is kind of the landing page. That's Ann Mintenden from Rockland. She actually doesn't know how to knit, but that's a whole nother story. But she makes a great, it looks great, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah. But if you go to at home at Efficiency Maine, they've got over here on the tools and tips, 2 different ways that you can compare heating costs and water heating costs, because there always are a lot of questions about, well, what about if the rate goes up, the rate goes down, what's my cost? If you click on the home heating cost to compare, it gives you a general comparison of if you were heating with cordwood and it costs $350 a cord, the average homeowner would spend $1,717. If you heated with natural gas, it's likely to be more expensive to do the same amount of heat if this is the cost. And they adjust these costs fairly regularly. So right now, a wood stove is about as efficient as you can get, unless you put in a geothermal heat pump, which is about a $40,000 investment for your house, probably. So great for new construction, not so good necessarily for retrofit. And if a heat pump, a ductless heat pump, is very, very efficient. And as you go down, you get less efficient when you go to oil boiler, and even less cost efficient when you go to propane, unless you're getting your propane at a really, really inexpensive cost. So this just helps to give you a comparison. The big news here is heat pumps are perhaps as much as almost half the cost of heating with oil or propane. And again, it doesn't mean you get rid of your existing system, but it means you can really lean on that heat pump oftentimes, but get that professional, get Eric or somebody like him there to really figure it out, because it isn't a one size fits all model.
Let's get back down that we have.
And I'll stop sharing that, but it's probably one of the best features on the Efficiency Maine website. The other feature there is that a vendor locator, so you can find people in your area and that do heat pumps, that do insulation, that air seal, that can do solar, all of those things. There's a vendor locator that can really help you identify someone that can help you on this journey. And most of us will come out for free to have an initial visit to assess opportunities and help get you headed in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And Eric, do you have time to quickly explain the difference between central versus mini splits before
Yes.
we wrap up? Okay.
Yeah, so the easiest way to explain it is a central system is a ducted system. Most of us are familiar with one system in the basement that does the whole first floor, or perhaps zoned with the same duct system or a similar duct system doing the second floor. They do make a variety of heat pumps, including what we normally think of as mini splits, in full-size air handlers that can do an entire home. They have air handlers small enough to do 1 or 2 bedrooms. Most of the time when we're looking at any kind of a mini split, we're looking at ductless. And there's a big difference in terms of the efficiency between them. If you can imagine trying to blow through a straw and blow a candle out, a very small straw is going to give you a very small amount of air coming out the other end to blow out the flame. And you have to blow much harder through it than you otherwise would, because the straw itself is creating friction, eating up energy in that air. So with a ducted system, the rule of thumb, and it varies a little bit, is once you go down to about 40% of your airflow, the duct system itself is soaking up so much energy that at that point your fan's turning, but you're not really getting much air at all coming out of the registers, and it's not going to heat or cool the home. So they're limited on how much that they can speed up, slow down, modulate to meet different conditions. A ductless system doesn't have that limitation, and they're able to modulate down to a very slow speed on a mild day where you don't need much to keep the home at the temperature that you wanted, as well as the ability to speed up if in the case of turning the system on a high demand day, excessive load, that kind of thing. So the ductless units themselves are always going to be the more efficient units. They're not going to be the prettiest because you're seeing them, as opposed to a ducted system, you're not seeing that. But that's kind of the main difference. And so when we speak of central, we're talking about central heating, central cooling, a ducted system. Mini splits, a lot of times we'll do these as kind of is more of a comprehensive thing where part of the home may get a ducted unit, part of the home may get ductless. It really depends on the installation and how to economically come up with the best system to fit. But that's the biggest differences between them.
Right.
I'm just sharing a screen here. This again, Efficiency Maine has got a section on heat pumps. And so this is an outside unit for, well, that could be either for a mini split or for a central system. Am I right, Eric?
That one's a mini split.
Okay. And then these are the indoor units. Here you can have these, I think they call them wall mount units, but they really are on the floor.
Correct.
And then this is probably the most common are these upper wall units. And then there's also this ceiling cassette. So that has the guts of it kind of up in the attic and it blows out warm and cold air from a central location in a room as opposed to from a wall. And then the ducted units are going to have ducts like a forced hot air heating system, whether it's feeding it through the floor or through the ceiling. But again, Efficiency Maine is really handy to answer some of these questions that you might have.
Okay, done an excellent job.
This is wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you to our presenters. We had Eric Pelchat from Pettigrew HVAC with us and Brian Robinson from Evergreen Home Performance. Really great information. I learned so much this evening, and thank you for coming and sharing your knowledge with us.
Welcome. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
everybody. Have a good evening.
You too.
Good night.
Right.